The moment everything changed, the evening air was cool in Los Angeles, the city light stretching endlessly into the night. Keanu Reeves sat quietly on the balcony of his home, his hands resting on the railing, his thoughts heavy with memories. He had lived through so much: pain, loss, success, silence. Yet nothing weighed on him more than the sound of Sandra Bullock's voice breaking as she turned away from him only hours earlier. He could still see it clearly. Her eyes had been filled with tears, her shoulders trembling as she whispered, "Keanu, I can't keep doing this." Her words had pierced him deeper than any wound he had known. Before he could speak, she had walked away, leaving the room filled with silence too heavy to bear. Keanu's heart pounded as he replayed that moment. Sandra was not just a friend, not just a co-star from their unforgettable days filming Speed. She was someone who had understood him in a way very few ever did. Their bond had lasted years, built on respect and quiet trust. But now, it felt like that bond was slipping away. The fight had started small, like so many do. Sandra had accused him of closing himself off again, of hiding behind his silence instead of sharing what was inside his heart. Keanu had tried to explain, but the words never came out right. He had always been better at showing than telling, but Sandra wanted more. She wanted to hear his truth, to know that he trusted her enough to let her into the deepest parts of his soul. Instead, he had stood frozen, his silence cutting sharper than any argument. And that was when she had broken down, tears spilling as she turned and walked out. Now the night felt colder than ever. Keanu leaned back against the chair, staring up at the stars. He thought of all the times Sandra had been there for him, reminding him to laugh, reminding him that life was more than just surviving loss. She had been light when his world felt dark, and now that light was walking away. His phone buzzed on the table beside him. It was his agent, reminding him of a major meeting tomorrow about a film project that could change his career again. Keanu picked up the phone, stared at the glowing screen, then set it back down. None of it mattered if he couldn't fix what was broken with Sandra. He remembered one of her words from earlier that evening. "Respect and kindness mean nothing if you won't let someone in." Those words echoed louder than the traffic below, louder than his own heartbeat. As the night dragged on, Keanu stood and walked inside, his footsteps echoing through the quiet house. Every corner reminded him of her laughter, of the way she could fill silence with warmth. He paused by the piano, where she had once sat, and teased him for never playing more than 2 notes. He smiled faintly, but the smile quickly faded. He realized something then. If he did not act, if he let fear and silence control him again, he would lose her forever. Yet the question burned inside him. What could he possibly say now? What words could heal the tears that had already fallen? Keanu lay down that night restless, his mind spinning with doubt and regret. Outside, the city never slept, but inside his home, everything felt painfully still. And though he tried to close his eyes, he knew sleep would not come easily, because somewhere out there Sandra Bullock was hurting, and he was the reason. The silence grew heavier. The next morning, Keanu woke to a gray sky. Even though the California sun tried to break through, his heart felt wrapped in clouds. He sat at the edge of his bed, his hands pressed together, the memory of Sandra's tears still cutting into him. His phone buzzed again. Messages from his agent, reminders about the big film meeting, but Keanu ignored them. He had spent too many years letting his career take the front seat, while his heart stayed quiet. Now, for the first time, he wondered if he had allowed his silence to cost him the person who mattered most. He tried to call Sandra. The line rang, but she didn't answer. He left no voicemail. What could he say? "I'm sorry" sounded too small. "Don't go" sounded too selfish. He spent the morning wandering through his home, memories of her in every corner. He could see her laugh in the kitchen when she had tried to cook for him and nearly burned the pan. He could see her gentle smile in the living room when she'd insisted on watching old movies with him, saying, "Even heroes need a night off." She had always found ways to make him feel human again, to remind him that kindness and presence were more valuable than anything else. By noon, he could not sit still anymore. He drove through the streets of Los Angeles, hoping to see her, hoping fate would lead him to her door. He finally stopped at a small cafe near West Hollywood, a place they had visited together years ago. As he walked in, his breath caught. There she was, Sandra, sitting alone by the window, her hair tied loosely, her eyes red as if she hadn't slept. She looked fragile, but there was still strength in the way she held herself. Keanu froze for a moment, unsure if he should approach. Then her eyes lifted and they met his. The world seemed to stop. He walked toward her slowly. When he reached her table, he whispered, "Sandra." She looked at him, her voice soft but wounded. "Keanu, why are you here?" He sat down across from her. "Because I can't leave things like this." Sandra shook her head, tears threatening again. "You never speak, Keanu. You keep everything inside until I feel like I'm standing outside your world. I don't need perfection. I just need you to let me in." Her words cut deep, but they also revealed the truth. Keanu lowered his eyes, his voice breaking. "I thought I was protecting you. My silence was my way of carrying pain alone. But maybe that silence has been hurting you instead." Sandra wiped at her eyes, trying to stay strong. "You've carried too much alone. But love, real love, is not about one person carrying everything. It's about sharing the weight." Her voice trembled at the end, and she turned her gaze away, as if she feared breaking completely in front of him. Keanu reached across the table, his hand hovering over hers but not yet touching. "I don't want to lose you, Sandra. Tell me how to fix this." Her lips parted, but no words came. She stood up instead, her eyes shining with tears. "I don't know if you can." And with that, she walked past him out of the cafe, leaving him sitting in the middle of strangers, his chest heavy with the fear that this time she might not come back. He sat frozen, staring at the empty chair across from him. People around him laughed, ate, and talked, but he felt like he was sitting in the middle of a storm that no one else could see. And in that silence, he realized that this was more than just a fight. This was the moment that would decide if their bond could survive, or if it would vanish like so many things he had lost before. The unexpected letter. Keanu sat in the cafe long after Sandra had gone. The chair across from him felt like a reminder of what he was losing. Her words kept echoing in his head. "I don't know if you can." They burned more than anger ever could. He drove home slowly, his thoughts heavy. When he stepped inside, the silence of his house wrapped around him like a cold blanket. Everything reminded him of her. The jacket she had once left on his couch. The cup she always chose from the kitchen. The faint echo of her laughter that seemed trapped in the walls. But then he noticed something new. On the table near the door was an envelope with his name written in Sandra's handwriting. His heart skipped a beat. He opened it carefully, his hands trembling. Inside was a short letter. "Keanu, I don't want to walk away, but I don't know how to stay when you keep me outside your heart. I am not asking for perfection, only for honesty. If you can open yourself, maybe we still have a chance. If not, please let me go before we both drown in silence." The words blurred as his eyes filled with tears. He sat down, holding the letter to his chest. Sandra was not gone completely. She was still reaching for him, but only if he had the courage to reach back. The next day, Keanu skipped the meeting about the new film project. Instead, he drove to the beach, the place where he often went to think. He stood barefoot in the sand, the waves crashing against the shore, his mind battling between fear and hope. He remembered the first time he and Sandra had truly laughed together on set years ago. She had teased him about being too serious, and he had admitted that laughter felt like a gift he rarely allowed himself. She had promised him then, "I'll always remind you how to smile." And she had kept that promise for years. So why was he failing her now? Why was he letting fear turn into silence? As he stared at the endless horizon, a voice pulled him back. "You look lost." He turned to see an older man sitting on a nearby bench watching the waves. His face was lined with years, but his eyes were kind. Keanu gave a faint smile. "Maybe I am." The man chuckled softly. "You're not the first. Sometimes we lose people not because we don't love them, but because we forget to show it. Love is not a secret to keep. It's a light. If you hide it, it dies." Keanu felt the words strike deep, almost as if they were meant for him alone. He thanked the man and walked back to his car, his heart stirring with a new resolve. That night, he sat at the piano Sandra once teased him about. His fingers hovered over the keys, and for the first time in years, he began to play. The soft notes filled the room, shaky but real. He recorded the melody on his phone and wrote a simple message. "For you. I don't have all the words, but I want you to hear my heart." He sent it to Sandra. Minutes felt like hours as he waited. Then his phone buzzed. Her reply was short. "Keanu, I don't know what to say. Can we meet tomorrow?" His chest tightened with both fear and relief. Tomorrow could be the day that decided everything. The breaking point. The next morning, Keanu arrived early at the small garden cafe where Sandra had asked to meet. His heart beat fast, every sound of clinking cups and voices around him drowned by the weight of what this moment meant. He had spent the night restless, replaying the piano notes, praying they had reached her heart. When Sandra walked in, she wore a simple blue dress, her hair tied back, but her eyes told the truth. She hadn't slept much either. She sat across from him, her hands folded tightly as if bracing herself for whatever was about to happen. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Sandra broke the silence. "Keanu, I listened to what you sent. It was beautiful. But music is not enough. I need more than gestures. I need your honesty. I need to know what's inside you." Keanu leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "I'm afraid, Sandra. Afraid of losing you like I've lost others. Afraid that if I open my heart completely, it will be taken from me. Silence has always been my shield, but it's hurting you, and I don't want to hurt you." Her lips trembled and tears filled her eyes, but she held them back. "Do you know how many years I've wished you would just say that? Not as an actor, not as a man admired by the world, but as you. This is all I ever wanted, to see your truth." Keanu reached across the table, this time taking her hand firmly. "Then hear me now. You are not outside my heart, Sandra. You are at the center of it. I don't want to lose what we have. I'll fight for it if you let me." Her eyes softened, but before she could respond, a voice interrupted. "Sandra." They both turned. Standing nearby was a man, tall, confident, his eyes narrowing at Keanu before softening at her. Sandra's face paled. "Michael," she whispered. Keanu's chest tightened. The name felt heavy, as if it carried a history he hadn't known. The man looked at Sandra with concern. "I didn't expect to see you here. I've been trying to reach you." Keanu stayed silent, his grip on Sandra's hand tightening slightly. She pulled her hand back gently, her voice shaking. "This isn't the time, Michael." But the man didn't leave. Instead, he looked at Keanu. "You should know something. She almost left the country last week. She was ready to start over. The only reason she stayed is because she was waiting for you to prove yourself." Sandra's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they fell freely. "Stop, Michael." Keanu felt his world tilt. The thought of her leaving, of disappearing from his life without a word, broke him. Yet at the same time, he saw the truth in her eyes. She had been pushed to the edge of giving up. The cafe around them blurred as emotions crashed. Sandra stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I can't do this here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I need time." And once again she walked away, tears trailing down her cheeks. Keanu sat frozen, his hands shaking, his heart heavy. Michael gave him one last look, his voice sharp. "If you don't fight for her now, you'll lose her forever." Keanu knew then that the next step would decide everything. His silence had already cost too much. This time he would have to choose action, no matter how much fear lived inside him. The vow to fight. Keanu drove aimlessly after Sandra left the cafe, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. Her tears haunted him. The image of her almost leaving the country shook him to his core. He realized that fear had already stolen too much of his life. If he stayed silent any longer, it would take her away too. He pulled over near the ocean, the waves restless under the setting sun. He stood there, the cold wind brushing against his face, and whispered to himself, "No more silence, no more running. This time, I fight." That night, Keanu sat at his desk, surrounded by scripts, contracts, and reminders of his career. He pushed them aside. He took out a notebook and began writing. Not lines for a film, but his truth for Sandra. Every word carried the weight of years he had kept hidden. He wrote about his grief, about his fear of love, about the silence he thought would protect him but only built walls around his heart. He wrote about her, the light she brought into his world, the way her laughter saved him, the way her kindness reminded him that he was more than just his losses. When he finished, his hands trembled, but his heart felt lighter. For the first time, he had put his soul into words. The next morning, he drove to Sandra's house. His chest tightened as he stood at her door, the letter in his hand. But when he knocked, there was no answer. He waited, knocked again, and finally slid the letter under her door, whispering, "Please read this." Hours later, as he sat in his car outside, he saw her silhouette appear by the window. She picked up the envelope, held it in her hands for a long time, then disappeared inside. Keanu's heart raced. He didn't know what her response would be, but he had finally spoken. That evening, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Sandra. "Meet me tomorrow at the old theater. If you mean what you wrote, show me." Keanu's breath caught. The old theater was where they had once attended a charity event together years ago, laughing in the dim lights, sharing quiet moments that no one else noticed. It was a place of memory, and now it could be the place of truth. The next day, Keanu arrived early. The theater was nearly empty, the faint smell of dust and velvet filling the air. Sandra stood near the stage, her arms folded, her eyes fixed on him as he walked in. He stepped closer, his voice steady but raw. "I meant every word. I've spent my life hiding behind silence because I was afraid of losing what I love. But you taught me that hiding is another kind of loss. I don't want to lose you, Sandra. Not now. Not ever." Her eyes shimmered with tears, but she stayed quiet. Keanu walked onto the stage, turned to face her, and spoke louder, his voice echoing through the empty hall. "I am not perfect. I am not a man who always knows the right words. But I am a man who knows this. You are the most important person in my life. And from this moment on, I will never let silence take that away from me again." His words hung in the air, heavy and true. Sandra's lips parted, her tears finally falling. She whispered, "Keanu, do you really mean this?" He stepped down from the stage, took her hands in his and looked into her eyes. "With all my heart." Her tears turned into quiet sobs as she leaned against him, her head on his chest. For the first time, he felt her relax fully in his arms, as if the walls between them had finally broken. Yet even in that moment of closeness, Keanu sensed the weight of the choice ahead. Their love had found new strength, but the world outside was waiting. His career, her dreams, their past wounds. The final test had yet to come. Love's final test, the theater echoed with silence after Sandra's tears softened into his chest. Keanu held her tightly, afraid that if he let go, she might vanish once more. For the first time in years, he had spoken his truth without fear, and she had listened. Yet deep inside, he knew this was not the end. Love was more than words. It was what came after when life demanded proof. In the days that followed, whispers began to spread. Reporters learned that Keanu had skipped a major film meeting, one that could have secured another career-defining role. Headlines questioned his choices. Some praised him for valuing his heart over fame. Others mocked him for turning down success for love. Keanu ignored the noise, but Sandra felt its weight. One evening, as they sat together in her living room, she looked at him with worried eyes. "They're saying you gave up too much for me. I don't want to be the reason the world turns on you." He shook his head, his voice calm. "You are not the reason I gave it up. I gave it up because I realized it was never more important than you." "Let them talk. Their voices don't matter. Yours does." Her eyes filled again, but this time with relief, not doubt. Just when peace seemed to return, another challenge came. Sandra received an offer to work on a film overseas, a project that would take her away for months. The news stirred old fears, distance, absence, the risk of silence returning. When she told Keanu, her voice trembled. "I don't know if we're strong enough for this yet. What if the distance breaks us again?" He took her hand, steady and warm. "Then let's not let it. Let's prove that love is not about being in the same place all the time. It's about being in the same heart. If this is your dream, Sandra, I'll stand with you no matter where you go." For a long moment, she just looked at him, her tears falling softly. Then she whispered, "You've changed, Keanu. You're not hiding anymore." He smiled faintly. "Because losing you once was enough to teach me that silence is the greatest loss of all." Months later, Sandra walked onto a set in Europe, her career shining brighter than ever. And there, quietly in the background, was Keanu, not as an actor, not as the world's star, but as the man who chose to walk beside her even if the road was uncertain. Reporters asked again why he had turned down his role. His answer was simple, the same he had told her. Love is not second. Love is first. And as Sandra watched him say those words, her eyes filled with the same tears that once fell when she walked away. But this time they were not tears of pain. They were tears of joy, of knowing she had finally found what she had always needed. His heart, fully open. Together they proved that love is not about perfection, but about resilience, kindness, and the courage to choose each other every single day.